Good day, everyone. Welcome to Black Logic. A brewing redistrict plan in Texas is poised to redraw political boundaries with stakes soaring tensions at breaking points. President Trump reportedly pledges a staggering $50 million to secure the arrest of Venezuela's president, raising serious questions about legally and diplomatically. Washington officials are sounding alarms over what they describe as escalating threats from the Russian government, straining ties and ramping up security concerns. Now, in a bold move, the U.S. now demands a hefty $15,000 deposit from visa applicants from two unspecified African countries, more likely Malawi and others, prompting widespread criticism and confusion. Leaked strategy shows Israel may launch a full takeover of Gaza City to force Hamas' hand, raising concerns and serious international concerns over civilian safety and hostage welfare. Also, a searing analysis explores how stories around economic migration from Africa and the Caribbean immigrants often overshadow foundational Black American contributions to fields like math, engineering, medicine, and space exploration. No hate, just historical clarity. And this is tethered by history and the divine mindset of the certain class of people that come over here from these countries, and referring to people of the continent of Africa as well as the region of the Caribbean. And we're going to break that down and why we see this as divisive. So by now, I'm pretty sure that all of you guys are aware of a new heated redistrict battle that's in Texas that risks reshaping congressional maps and unpending the political balance as both parties gear up for a high-stakes land grab. And the reason why a lot of people are looking at this as a playbook and a strategy for the entire nation is because that this can occur in a lot of swing states and a lot of blue states that the GOP, aka the Republicans, do not have the majority of. So this is kind of the testing ground to see if this is a plausible and feasible implementation strategy that can unseat Democrats. So in those regards, turning the entire nation red. This is the way how politicians do not have voters to pick their representative, but for politicians to pick their voters. So as this particular story unfolds and how the GOP navigates this space, again, this may be the playbook for other states who are swing states as well as majority blue states to prevent the takeover of the Republicans. But I'll keep you guys updated with that as well. And again, if you're new to Black Logic, please hit the subscribe button as well as a notification bell so you're notified every time I go live or release a video. Now, President Trump reportedly offers a jaw-dropping $50 million reward for the arrest of the Venezuelan president, sending shockwaves through diplomatic and legal circles. Now, what's interesting about this, we have the most powerful military in the world. We have a lot of paid-for militias out of BlackRock and Blackstone and a lot of other groups that we have, prior military, Navy SEALs, special forces, that we can just use contractors to go and arrest the Venezuelan president. So why are we not doing that? This is almost like a world bounty. $50 million. Do you know how many countries will start missions to apprehend the Venezuelan president? I've never seen another president go after, well, I've never seen an American president put a bounty on another nation, another foreign president. I've never seen this before. He's literally put a bond, he's literally put a bounty of capture on the Venezuelan president. It says that the Trump administration is doubling to $50 million reward to arrest the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, and accusing him of working with cartels to flood the U.S. with fentanyl-laced cocaine. It goes on to state here that the Trump administration Again, the $50 million reward for the arrest of the Venezuelan president, accusing him of being one of the world's largest narco traffickers and working with cartels to flood the U.S. with fentanyl. Under President Trump's leadership, Maduro will not escape justice and he will be held accountable for his despicable crimes, Attorney General Pam Bondi said Thursday in a video announcing the reward. Maduro was indicted in Manhattan federal court in 2020 during the first Trump presidency, along with several close allies on federal charges of narco-terrorism and conspiracy to import cocaine. Now, at that time, the U.S. offered a $15 million reward for his arrest. That was later raised by the Biden administration to $25 million, the same amount the U.S. offered for the capture of Osama bin Laden following the September 11, 2001 attack. So now we have a mission, we have a story that seems to be bipartisan. President Biden went after the Venezuelan president as well as President Trump, and he's doubled the bounty, he's doubled the fee in order to capture, not kill, the Venezuelan president. Now, granted, he's the president of an entire another country that has a security force, that has an army, a navy, an air force. So how do we believe this is going to happen? Is America going to war with Venezuela? Because again, we're going after their president, their commander-in-chief, their sovereign leader, the head Venezuelan in charge. So how are we going to go about doing this? So we're like, hey, for the capture of the Venezuelan president, and this is how, again, in some regards, how America can destabilize a country. Because you're going to have infighting. You know how many people in Venezuela that live in poverty? Do you know how many people will start to gather up guns, 20, 30 people, to infiltrate the Venezuelan presidency grounds and try to capture the Venezuelan president and hand him over to the United States of America? He's going to, this is one of the first indicators of instability of a country, when you start to have implosion of the citizens to capture the president of the country. Now, I can never see in America where a foreign president would state that we're going to offer you guys $1 billion if you can capture President Trump. That would, in my opinion, to no American president that will ever happen, just because of the way America is set up. But wow, this is absolutely bonkers. To capture another president. Just when you believe that you've seen it all. Now, I don't know why this story didn't make big news when President Biden was in office. I did hear some remnants. I did hear some scuttlebutts. I did hear some rumors, but I've never seen it get front page news like this. I wonder why. I wonder why when the Democrats were in charge of the presidency, why we didn't get headline news stories similar to this of some of the same actions that liberal presidents have made. Not the state that I'm a Republican or Democrat, because I'm not. But I just see the duplicity mindset of both political parties of how one presidency, the current administration, has a lot more transparency than the previous administration. Now, granted, we don't have full transparency when it comes to the Trump administration, because if we did, then they will release the Epstein list and or files. But yet again, we still have more transparency than we ever have before. So there is a plus, but minus. Now, are you guys aware of this story here? Because U.S. officials are warning about increasingly aggressive threats from Russian government and the escalating tensions and raising alarm across defense and intel agencies. Now, what's interesting about this particular news story, folks, is that we're now going after the country of India. It states here, imposition of tariffs. I find the government of India is currently directly or indirectly importing Russian Federation oil. And we've been hearing this story for quite some time. It goes on to say that accordingly, and as consistent with applicable law, articles of India imported into the customs territory of the United States shall be subject to an additional ad valorem rate of duty of 25%. Subject to Section 3 of this order, this rate of duty shall be effective with respect to goods entered for consumption or withdrawn from warehouse for consumption on or after 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 21 days after the date of this order, except for the goods were loaded onto a vessel at the port of loading and in transit on the final mode of transit prior to entry into the United States before that particular time. It goes on to say that these products and shipments are entered for consumption or withdrawn from warehouse on that same date. So again, this is to impose the alarm duty that this order should be in addition to any other duties, fees, taxes, exactions, and charges applicable. And basically what all of this is stating, because again, I'm not going to read it in its entirety, is that India, as well as other countries that are not named like Turkey and China, are receiving Russian oil either directly or indirectly, which is violating the sanctions in which the United States of America have imposed on Russia. So I wonder what our tie is going to be when it comes to H-1B visas for students and work with the country of India. Because do not forget, ladies and gentlemen, we have a large population of Indians in America, and a lot of these Indian Americans have tech jobs. They're in AI, they're in robotics, they're in software, they're in hardware. Because when you go to your ITs, it don't matter what level, whether it be the federal government, the state government, corporate America, private business, a lot of these shops, majority of the people who are doing the software and coding and programming are from the country of India. So I wonder if this is going to tie into immigration. Is the federal government they're going to start a campaign where they're going to look at expired visas from people from India or work visas there. So again, this can turn very dark very soon if India is found guilty of violating U.S. sanctions that we have imposed on Russia. So I'll keep you guys updated with that as well. That could be a definitely turnout that will turn a lot of people's head. Now, the U.S. demanding an unprecedented $15,000 deposit from visa applicants from 2 African countries. Now, as you say here, those countries are Malawi as well as Zambia. Again, those 2 countries are Malawi and Zambia. They are to pay a $15,000 deposit, according to the U.S. State Department. And the 12-month pilot program aims to curb visa overstays or where screening and vetting information is considered deficient, according to a notice published by the State Department. And officials say that the citizens of the countries other than Malawi and Zambia may soon also need to pay a similar deposit, which would be returned at the end of their visit to the U.S. The U.S. administration has taken several steps to further President Trump's agenda of stemming illegal immigration. That's not going to stop illegal immigration, but yet again, it may slow it down for countries and people who come from impoverished nations. Why isn't this so-called visa deposit required for all countries? Why not? Why just African countries? Why not India? Why not China, Japan, Korea, countries in South America? Again, all these people from all over the world come to America for one reason. Now, granted, that's a stretch. I know people come to America for other reasons. They're tourists. They have family here. But majority of the people that come to America and stay over expired visas, no matter the classification, is because of economics in some regards. So again, why these 2 countries? And they're stating that this is a pilot program. Well, if this is a pilot program, why not pick one country from each continent, one country from each region? Why not one country in Europe, one state in Australia, one country in Africa, one country in the Caribbean, one country in South America? Why not make the pilot program universal, international? Why just say, you know what, we're just going to pick 2 African countries? Interesting, is it not? But nonetheless, if you're from these African countries, you're going to have to pay $15,000 to come to America. Malawi and Zambia, you're going to have to pay $15,000. Now, at the end of your stay, you get your $15,000 back, minus fees and taxes, of course. It's going to be taxed. Don't worry about it. America It will tax you. But I digress. Now, reports detail that Israeli leadership possibly plan to seize Gaza City to pressure Hamas, raising the stakes for civilians and hostage safety amid a looming humanitarian crisis. So, what happened to the ceasefire? What happened to the humanitarian aid? What happened to the starving children in Gaza? What happened? What happened to the U.S. stepping in and taking over the humanitarian efforts to ensure that these Palestinians in this area of Gaza receive proper aid, medical supplies, shelter, food, water, generators? Whatever happened to this? So I've seen video clips and I've seen pictures and reports of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, literally preparing for a full-scale ground invasion of Gaza. And this is to eradicate the area of that area of the Hamas militia, of the Hamas terrorist group. Really? So the casualties are up almost to 50,000 people and probably more. And they're stating that, oh, we're half of those fighters, or half of those people rather, were from Hamas. They're Hamas fighters. Really? Well, the reports state that it was like, maybe 15,000, no more than 20,000. So we roughly have 30,000 people who have been unalived due to what international news media are stating, that this is a full-scale genocide, that Israel allegedly is trying to increase their landmass. And some people state that in order to take over a land, you have to totally demolish it, because you have to erase culture, you have to erase people, you have to erase infrastructure, and then build up that land in the image in which you like it. Now, just given historical reports, it seems as though that these so-called alleges are being acted out in real time here, ladies and gentlemen. As I told you before, the area of Gaza is decimated. 90% of Gaza is demolished. It's in rubbles. Even the buildings that you may see standing, believe it or not, are not worthy for you to live and or stay in. So Israel is now preparing for a full-scale invasion. It doesn't matter how you look at this. And the UK, by the way of France and countries within the United Kingdom, supposedly are going to recognize Palestine as a statehood later on this month. Why are we waiting to recognize Palestine as their own country, as a sovereign nation? And as I told you before, it's because Palestine does not have a unifying body of officials that govern the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. And then secondly, the most important thing is they do not have a standing military, Air Force, Navy. In order for you to defend yourself, in order for you to protect yourself and call yourself a nation, you can't just have a flag. You can't just wave the Palestinian flag. And granted, there are Palestinians. So when President Trump came out and stated that, if France and the UK recognize Palestine as statehood, he's going to raise tariffs. He kind of implemented that. But I'm like, why are you not recognizing people as their own people? They're in the region of Palestine. They're Palestinian. They have a flag. Now, granted, they don't have a unifying body of government, but nonetheless, they are a statehood. They are a country. That during the United Nations partition plan, they divided Palestine to give land to Israel. Thus, the construction of Israel in 1948 by the way of the UN. And who wasn't at this partition plan meeting? No representatives from the Palestinian state. Because in this Western world, yes, this Western world, Asia included, in order for you to be recognized as a statehood, in order for you to be recognized as a country, you have to have a military. Why didn't they give that? Why didn't they partition Iran? Why didn't they partition Iraq? The countries that we are not allies with? Why didn't they give land to those Jewish people who wanted a state to call their own? Why didn't they give land from these countries we're not allies with? Because they have a military. So again, I know hearts and minds are going out to the Palestinian people because literally they have no defense. The only defense that the Palestinians have are Western nations. This is worldwide destruction. And I thought that America was going to step in and take over the humanitarian aid effort to ensure that these people who are in dire need to receive these resources. Now, deep down inside, I know a lot of people don't want to see any people in turmoil and chaos, especially if they're not terrorists. They're just regular people going about their everyday lives. And see, now that I put myself in this predicament, in this situation, but I always ask myself this question: what if? What if that was you? What if that was me? When you want other countries, other people to stand up and fight for you, not saying that that needs to be your full attention, because it's not my full attention, but it does need to be recognized in some regards from everybody. Because America is tied to the resources that are provided to Israel to do the things that they do. And these are the results. And these are the results. Because before Israeli infiltration, Palestine was a very beautiful and peaceful region in some regards. And people will tell you that before, as they call them, the Zionists came, and as the UN partition plan divided this land, there were Christians, Muslims, and Jewish people already in the region. And slowly but surely, through many avenues and many different reasons, Israel has expanded the amount of land through some of the same things we see today. Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. Terrorists, terrorists, terrorists. And they invade, they occupy, and they don't leave. I guess nobody cares. But I digress. And the reason why, because as Black Americans, foundational Black Americans here in America, we have our own plight, we have our own fight. And I'll start here. African immigrants choose to come to America for a variety of reasons, often driven by a combination of factors in their home countries. They call them push factors. And the perceived benefits and opportunities available in the United States of America. Conflict and persecution, poverty and unemployment, climate change and environmental degradation, lack of jobs, and economic and job opportunities. So I don't know if you guys have been noticing, there's been an uproar in social media of people who are in the foundational Black American space, Black empowerment space, against people from Africa as well as the Caribbean who are part of the tether class. Now, granted, I want to make sure I make a clear distinction. This part of the video is, again, directed towards the African and Caribbean tether class. Those who come over here, turn their nose up, and state that they're doing so much better than Black Americans, that they're smarter, that they're more hardworking than Black Americans. We call them the tether class. That is what this portion of the video is contributed to. I'm not talking about anyone else from these countries who come over here, do their business, okay, pave a way for their family, come over here legally. Not talking about you guys. I'm talking about those who get on social media and just run their mouth and speak ill will about the Akatas, about the Jareers, about those people who they're smarter than. Let's talk about it. We call them tethers. The reason why we call them tellers, ladies and gentlemen, is because they come over here with a duplicitous mindset of white colonization and the ideology of white supremacy. Yes, they do. Their lands in Africa are no longer colonized ever since the 1960s. Now, that doesn't mean that white supremacy does not reign supreme in African countries, because Western powers still have heavy influence in these African countries, where the people will say that, oh, our government is corrupt. All governments are corrupt, some more so than others, but all governments are corrupt. But you don't see Americans fleeing to other nations by the millions to change the demographics and to depress wages and to undermine a particular group. And this group is foundational Black Americans. Or where we're not like you, Akatas, because we come over here and we work hard. You work hard. And all the jobs in like the construction space, all the jobs in these different industries that you see people from other countries, majority of, do not forget historically Black Americans had these jobs. Black Americans were majority of the landscapers. Black Americans were the majority of the construction workers, us and the Italians. But by the way of the mafia and other white supremacists, we got boxed out of a lot of these industries. Service jobs. So Black Americans, we had to amalgamate ourselves to other skill sets because we had all these service jobs, construction jobs, plumbers, electricians, welders. We had all of these jobs. Who have them now? Immigrants. Not because all of a sudden, oh, Black Americans are lazy, are they not? They're really unintelligent. They're really stupid. They're really low IQ people, are they not? All of a sudden, we're low IQ and we're lazy. Really? But no one's talking about the system of white supremacy and the barriers that they put in place. Now, you're going to have some people in my comment section talking about how this, that, and the other. I tend not to respond to this, or I'm just a smart ass in some regards, because I know that you know. There's laws on the books that prevented certain things and certain demographics. Think about the districting very quickly. I can use this as an example. How the GOP is redistricting the map lines of majority of neighborhoods that are Black and Latino in order for them to gain and upseat Democrats, because majority of the areas they're referring to mostly vote Democrat. And unfortunately, majority of those people are Black and Latino. What am I getting at? They are remapping and redistricting lines, because if you have an enclave of people, you have a community in an area where, let's say 50% of the people are white and 50% of the people are Black and Latino, and you're going to have some white people that are going to vote for liberals, and then you have the majority of Black and Latinos that will vote for liberals, then thus that community, that area, that district will be Democratic. It will be blue. But if we redraw the line and then separate and put these people over where majority of Democrats already are, the vote will not be split, then these seats become Republican. It's that simple. Just redraw the lines. So the politicians are not, the politicians are picking their voters versus voters picking their politicians. Redlining at its best, is it not? Voter suppression at its best, is it not? And so when I look at the demographics and I look at the tether class, they don't understand the construction of America. They don't understand what Black Americans went through and what we still go through today until it happens to them. So let's talk about economic migration, because we're witnessing Africans and Caribbeans and, of course, other people from other countries. But this is what this is directed at, the tether class, arriving on our shores, flipping the narrative. I left poverty, climate decay. I came for opportunity. These are all fair reasons, is it not? In my opinion, absolutely not. But beneath that, there's often a rift, a silent undermining. Because I've heard it. We've come from countries not run by colonial powers anymore. We're intelligent. We're capable. We built our infrastructure back home. You did? Last time I checked, the Chinese built your infrastructure. Yet so often the conversation erases the legacy of Black Americans who did pave the roads, literally in America and figuratively in America, so that now others can walk it. It feels divisive, does it not? Because this is not in hate, ladies and gentlemen. This is not in hate. Our delineation is not concentrated in hate, but it is in culture. Not the culture that people say we do not have, even though around the world our culture is exploited, our culture is revered, our culture is celebrated and recognized. As if Black Americans haven't invented thousands of things. Lonnie Johnson, the super soaker, Garrett Morgan, the traffic signal, Marion Van Brown, the home security system. Open heart surgery, what about Dr. Daniel Hale Williams? I think it's important to talk about these things because if you don't know the achievement of one group, you may not admire them, you may not respect them. Blood bank foundations, Dr. Charles Drew. These pioneers didn't come here. They were born here and they built America's foundations. When we talk about math, engineering, space, medicine, there's no comparison. This isn't ignorance. This is true. Have we forgot about the movie The Hidden Figures or the story The Hidden Figures about these beautiful, intelligent Black women who created algorithms for us to reach the moon? Have we forgotten about that? Have we forgot about Vivian Thomas, who was a medical assistant assisting a doctor at Johns Hopkins University Hospital, who he came up with the procedure to cure the blue baby syndrome? Look it up. All of these achievements of Black Americans in this country. But yet, we have not achieved anything. We haven't contributed not only to the nation, but to the world. Yet some of these same voices we proudly say, as they look down on foundational Black Americans as if they're better. And again, I can't name every single country because there's just so many of these very few people I would like to believe that we call tethers that are very divisive. And thus they state that we are divisive and that we're spewing white supremacy ideology, even though they come from a country and or continent that have been colonized by European and Westerners, and that only were their countries colonized, the infrastructure, the government, the military, but also their mindsets. They say that they're from Haiti and Nigeria and Kenya and Jamaica and all these other countries. Because when they achieve things in America, they state that I'm a proud Jamaican immigrant, I'm a proud Nigerian immigrant, and that they celebrate their success. And fair enough. But when crime headline hit, suddenly it's just a Black person. And then we lose nuance, do we not? Because again, this is not about dislike, ladies and gentlemen. It's about historical recognition, acknowledging that foundational Black Americans carved paths, not because we fled oppression. We stood 10 toes down in oppression, and even to this day, because we are persistent with it. We're not fleers. And then to think that people, in some regard, share some of the same genealogy in some regards, they speak dismissively about it. That's a duplicitous mindset. They're letting colonial mentality echo in their heads and also in their speech and thus in their actions. See, we're not asking for superiority. We're just saying, what about respect? Can we do that? Where's the disconnection here? That's not, see, and that's what we need to tether the truth with, quote unquote. So when people are referring to these diaspora wars, I make a very clear distinction that is not all the people from Africa, not all the people from the Caribbean. But unfortunately, there is enough to make head waves. And for people like myself who really kind of dialed back from this area to start to speak out against it, because not only is this backwards white supremacy rhetoric, but it's nonsense. Because we don't go to Africa. When I went to Ghana, South Africa, and Kenya, I didn't speak any ill will about those countries. Even when I did my vacation videos, which you guys know I do anytime I go somewhere. They were very beautiful and nice people there. Now, a lot of the country, unfortunately, where foreigners, by the way of Italy, Great Britain, and other countries have colonized certain areas, their areas were immaculate, especially in South Africa. Those people whose ancestry derives from the Netherlands, the Dutch, also known as the Afrikaners, also known as the Boers in South Africa, they live on pristine beach property near Tabletop Mountain in South Africa. They're living their best lives. 90% of South Africa are dark melanated hue Africans, people from the Zulu, people who speak Xhosa and all these other different beautiful people, no less. But when you look at the entire country of Africa, the entire country have been colonized in one way or another, either by force or by mindset. Look at Northern Africa. They call Northern Africa the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. How? Because when you go to places like Morocco, Algeria, Libya, when you look at the northern part of these countries, people are white as snow. Some of them are olive color, but some of them are white as snow. Just look up a picture of an Algerian. Now, supposedly these people migrated and conquered North Africa and took it as their own. Kind of reminds me of Israel, does it not? Very interesting. But nonetheless, people who come over here and speak ill will about Black Americans from Africa and the Caribbean, not all, I got to keep saying it because I know people are really short-minded about it. I just kind of look at them like this. Have you seen your country? So you're telling me that the top 10% of your country had enough money to come over here and in some regards do Uber and other businesses. Of course, you start businesses and then say, well, we come over here, we got better education and we have better jobs and we make more money and we're doing better than you guys. We're smarter, we work harder. And it's very easy to judge the top 10% of one country against 100% of the population from another. But I can promise you this, for those tethers who speak in this manner, take your top 10% versus Black American, foundational Black Americans' top 10%. And I'll make you a bet, $1. Because we're broke, right? We're stupid. We're illiterate. We're really lazy. But I'll bet you $1 that we will outperform you 100 times over. And don't get me wrong, I understand why you had to flee to America in order to pave a way for economic opportunities. We call them economic refugees, economic asylum. I know why you did this, even though that your country is ran by your countrymen and women. I know why you had to flee to America. Is it because the tether class of these countries are cowards? Because it's really easy to say that my government is corrupt. Then what are you going to do about it? Well, I'm just going to flee to America. I'm going to flee to Europe. I'm going to flee to Australia. I'm just going to go where the governments are not as corrupt. But aren't you fleeing back to white mommy and white daddy? Because we haven't fled anyway. We've been here. We have been here prior to slave ships. And probably about 500,000 of us came on slave ships. Well, a lot of us have American Indian, Native American ancestry. It's even in our blood, no less. I checked my ancestry. I had 2%, not so much. But as I look at this, and you know what? And this is just a fun joke, because we always get demonized and stereotyped that a lot of Black Americans smoke marijuana. Well, Native Americans did too. They call it hemp. And that's just part of our bloodline. It's part of our religion, no less. Is it not? Like I said, it was a joke. But again, this is again directed towards the tether class. I just wanted to get off my chest because it's just funny to me that people come to this country and act if they're better, but they could not pave a way. They could not create opportunities in their own country. There you have it.